So I'm going to focus on you for a couple of questions. So, what's the greatest piece of leadership advice you've ever received?
Ah, um, Good question. I would say I'm going to say this wrong. I wish I had a specific quote I can give, but how's this? Know your business or know that you don't know your business. And I mean by that. And I mean that because if you're new to a company or you're new to an industry, it is not bad that you do not know that, but you should recognize that you don't have the skill set or the subject matter expertise, and you should empower yourself by surrounding by yourself with people at that organization who really understand it and can help you make decisions. It can give you the background. It could really inform the history here, why this happened, and what this regulation is. But if and until you say that you know it, what I've seen that great leaders do, they either become like what I chose to do, though it took me a long time. They become strong subject matter experts so that their teams respect them and believe them and put credence to the decisions that they're making because they know, oh, Jesse gets it. Jesse understands what we're talking about. We're gonna do it. Or they recognize that they're not there yet. And they recognize to the team that I'm not there yet, but I'm making this decision because I advise with these people. I realize this, I analyze this. Those are great leaders for people who want to work for them. You all know the opposite with it. Don, I'm sure you've seen it where somebody comes in from industry A to a company that's industry B, and he or she thinks that it's just it's the same thing, and it doesn't go well. The employees don't like working for somebody who's making decisions that out of context, who doesn't take the time to know that they don't know what they're talking about, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so important as well. I feel like even as a leader to just recognize where those gaps exist. So that way, you can put good people around you that do know how to address whatever that is, so that you're not trying to oversimplify something, but at the same time, you have a team that essentially, can fully support those things at the end of the day.
E Exactly, and it empowers your team. It makes makes your team useful, makes them recognize their own experience that they can explain, and it's a great way, and I've found that, I personally enjoy working for people who know what they don't know, and I also feel that my team enjoys working for me, largely because I certain areas I know what I'm doing. There are still areas where I say, "I have no idea, let me bring in a subject matter expert."
Excellent. Jesse, what inspires you?
Well, that's a good question. Okay, so it really this is I didn't come up with this quote. This is, I think, a New York Times article. I could be wrong. We're in the golden age of medicine right now. It's incredible. It's just incredible to see what we're seeing. We're curing and treating diseases in ways that are unimaginable. Like if you read the news of the new drug launches, we're curing diseases or maybe subsets or submutations of diseases that were scourges on society for centuries. Like hemophilia, sickle cell, many cancers. These manufacturers are releasing cures for these things. It's just incredible. It's interesting. HIV is now something you just take a pill for every day and live your life, or you get a shot every couple of months and go on and live your life and just live a normal life. And there's nothing. And that just thinks for those of us even our age who remembers when HIV was a death sentence. Everybody who got HIV died. There's just horrible, things from the 80s and 90s. And now it's just okay. Well, whatever you it just live your life. It astounds and it inspires me, and it makes me very pleased to support this industry. It's just incredible. I think people, almost are getting used to the fact that these new treatments are out there, and there's only more to come. There's innovations. This is all public information coming in Alzheimer's and ALS, and there are these breakthroughs coming in even more types of cancers. It's really really incredible, and I'm just inspired by these press releases or these jaw dropping news articles about strong results in a clinical study for something that has just been impossible to even treat, let alone cure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. What concerns you?
So, um, frankly, I'm not getting political, but research funding. This is not just federal research funding. This is because of all the aforementioned things I mentioned, all the new laws, all the new regulations, all the new, competitive aspects. In internal manufacturer spending, their margins are being crunched, and when margins are being crunched, they might cut R&D. And also, it just, common news that federal research funding is drying up, both for manufacturers, both for university level. And that golden age of medicine that we're living in right now could just fizzle. It could just fizzle without money and resources to support basic and advanced research, and or to enable other companies to support basic and advanced research. All these things we're enjoying, and these clinical trials that we're watching that could, save people who never were able to save before, it could just all come to a halt. And that is something that concerns me and keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I think it's a real concern. I mean, I was having a conversation last week, shortly after the podcast, actually last week, where somebody was telling me that a particular university's research funding, 60% of it came from the government. And so now 60% of it's essentially gone until we figure out, what's the next step. Again, not to make it political, but just trying to figure out, like, what do you do with 60% of your costs while you sort of try and continue things forward? I have a feeling there's probably a level of, good Samaritans that will come along and say, hey, look, there's some of this that we could support, but it's probably not enough to fully fill that gap of 60%. And this is only one particular university. I mean, there are other universities that their split was a little different. And so who knows, how this plays out, in the end. And then, you have at the same time, you have companies that are extremely small, say less than 10 people, that, have been working on the same thing for the last few years with some support from government funding and a very, very thin sort of level of support from venture capital and other funding sources for the last couple of years has been tough anyway. And so now
Exactly.
without some of the things that you would get otherwise from states or from the federal government, what are you going to do? I just had I've described this before in other episodes where I believe that there will come a time where big pharma will turn to look at the market of companies that are developing the next series of molecules and creating the next level of technology, and there's going to be a vacuum there because
Yeah.
sort of those things will come along in 10, 5 to 10 years, right? So there's a lengthy period of time that all this stuff occurs. And will we see it tomorrow? I doubt it, but we will see a future where there'll be a gap, I believe.
I agree. I agree. It's going to be, and again, we'll see how things play out. I'm sure the news is different from an hour ago based on the world we live in right now. So we'll see how this plays out. But it is a genuine concern, and it's also like, not just, funding, but the legislation that's passed, the Inflation Reduction Act, well-meaning, has a lot of unintended consequences that also could, halt potentially getting existing drugs approved for new indications, or biosimilar and generic competition. There's a lot of unintended consequences that are coming up that could also, again, uh, you know, reduce the glory of this golden age of medicine that we're in. It's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question. What excites you?
Um, again, I think I've plugged my company enough, but the first thing I think about is our Rainmaker conference, which is next month. I especially since COVID, this is just generally speaking, conferences in general. I used to be in the field all the time, and I learned so much by physically sitting in a manufacturer's with their contract marketing people, and really getting to know and being in the rooms while they're discussing their 340B policy, or their pricing things. And you know some manufacturers are back fully, on site. Many manufacturers are not, and even the ones that are back, the budgets they're giving to bring consultants there are low. They like us to be remote. So I'm so excited to be with people and physically learn from the manufacturer community, which is where I got a lot of my knowledge originally, all in the same place. So, of course, that applies to our Rainmaker conference in May, but also in general to some of these larger conferences I'm able to attend. It gives me something very much to look forward to in my job.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success Podcast. Thank you for being here and sharing what it is that you do in Model N. I hope that a lot of people gleaned a lot of great perspectives from this, because I definitely think that this is not an easy place to play, in our overall field. And so I definitely got a lot out of the conversation.
I appreciate it, Don.